Hey, Jeanene.
Hey, Eric. I was just going to type you a chat that said I have to go get my coffee cup out of my coffee maker. It'll take me like 20 seconds. Thanks. Be right back. Okay.
Okay, it's still just us.
That's funny. Oh, well. Time changes.
Do you think we should use the board of directors agenda if any information needs to be added?
I don't think that's a bad thing to do. I went in this morning and took Dell off of it.
I just took off Michael Charney and John Cashon.
On the board agenda document? Yeah.
They both resigned.
Right. No, I know. I just didn't. When we turned over boards last January, I started this document called Permissions and Access, and I was trying to sort of outline everything that, the secretary needs access to these 4 things, and all board members need access to these 10 things, and because we're not elegant about how we share docs and stuff, and so, and then also when it changes, you would do the undoing as well. You would undo their permissions and access. So, and I think that's a job I could give the board development group, and they would do a great job of it. So, hey, Egberto.
Hey, ¿qué pasó?
My Spanish is rusty, but I was going to try to say I'm still in my jammies.
Must be nice. I am here still cold, even though it's warming up to 60, but somehow I don't feel it.
Yeah, it's been cold there. Hey, for us here, it's still in the 30s.
Ouch! I would die.
Yeah, well,
I would die.
Listen, Honoka'a is 54 degrees. Everyone is dying. The houses are uninsulated. They have no heat source. And all I did was to my sister, I said, shut the windows. Because basically, you camp indoors there. You camp indoors. And sometimes she forgets that when it's cold, even your refrigerator will help heat your house if you shut the windows. So.
That's true, though. It's a heat pump on the other side.
That's right. That's right. Listen,
this is true. It is a heat pump.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, if you want to talk about heat transfer technology, I'll have that conversation with you. That's one of my areas of expertise.
Let me give you a joke about the refrigerator, right? It always kind of amuses me when it's hot and folks open the refrigerator to cool off. It's like, it's against heat transfer principles that says ultimately you can do that.
Oh, I just checked. It's up to 66 again in Honoka'a, and it's 72 in Kailua. So, but not here. I'm checking. It's 36
is that high up?
in Portland. Say again?
That is high up in the mountains, huh?
Well, Kailua is on the coast, but our home in Kapolei is probably a little over 1,000 feet, and but the nearest Starbucks is at 2,500 feet.
Wow.
Yeah, but it takes 20 minutes to get there.
Yeah, it's actually going up.
So my weather reporter, I just looked right now, says it's 30 degrees out there.
I was trying to pull back up your document.
Which one, hon?
COI.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
I just got a text. Let me check and see who's texted me here. Nope.
Cameron said is on its way or something like that so far.
I'm going to hang up and try to text. I don't know if I can text and be on this one. I'm going to hang up and then text everyone and call back in.
Yeah, Cameron says he's a minute or two away. Okay, there's Board of Directors done.
Who put
go ahead.
In red? Who put those items, the questions in red?
Me.
Okay.
Because they're actually questions. Yeah, I'm going through this document and I'm kind of putting out and at the bottom I realized you couldn't tell my questions from other things. And they were, gosh, it looks like they're not all there now.
Wasn't this your document that you wrote, or was this a part of our thing?
Let me see. No, the conflict, which one are you looking at, the Viridian one or the conflict of interest one?
The COI, the one that you emailed me at COI.
Okay. Right. I'm wondering why it's not up on my screen. I'll go open it. I was trying to shut down things for the call, and I obviously shut down too much.
What you looking for?
Oh, the COI doc, the conflict of interest doc that I wrote. And I was, I have, at any given time I have, 30 docs up on my computer. The red questions. Yeah, the red questions in the conflict of interest doc are mine.
Okay.
I extensively commented over the last hour.
You extensively did what?
I extensively commented on that document over the last
I'm here.
hour.
Yeah, I saw that.
Hi, Cameron's on. Forgive me, but I'm going to end up driving with my wife and my son during this call. So, hold on. Get a few things going here. Thank you.
Yeah, my mailbox just steamed up. Jesus Christ.
Yes.
I just thought I cleaned it out. It's back up to 6. Jesus. Whenever you have one, we're putting together a Valentine's Day thing. And the amount of traffic one Valentine's event can happen. Oh.
Jeanene, I think to be historically accurate, I think we've established that Jesus was a man, but you could definitely be God.
And she's pissed.
Yeah. So, if it was a democracy, I'd vote you in as God.
There you go. I'm on another board of directors for the Organization for Economic Initiatives here in Oregon, and the president of the board yesterday said, "Oh, we lowly inhabitants of Earth, honor and praise she who comes to us from Saturn." I said, Saturn. I wrote back Venus. I got to come from Venus.
Yeah, Saturn is the god of war.
Right. I said, dude.
Yeah,
it's like, dude, this is...
More wars have been started over women than anything else, I think, sometimes.
Well, dude, everything we do is so we can get the best one.
That's all about the irony. Helen of Troy, the Greeks. I love it.
Well, yeah, my mom has breast cancer and had a radical mastectomy about a year ago, and so we, of course, honor her as an Amazon. She's an Amazon.
Wow.
Because she only has one breast, so she can still shoot her arrows.
What?
Yeah.
I was not aware of that part of the lore of the Amazon women.
Yeah,
they really only have.
The warriors removed the breast nearest their pole arm on their bow.
Are you serious?
I'm texting Justin unless someone else wants to text him.
Oh, no, he said he'll be here. They thought it was 20 minutes later.
Okay. All right, thanks. So should we check in, and then Justin can check in when he comes in?
That works.
Okay.
Okay, so I actually want to... Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeanene.
Oh, well, I wanted to check in first because I wanted to say happy birthday coffee party.
Yeah. That's right.
Woohoo! Right. Woo-hoo. I'm having an extra cup of coffee to celebrate. Okay. Cameron, check-in, please.
Hi, I'm driving in this lovely cold weather here on the way back. Actually, very successful business brunch, which is a good thing. And I look forward to this discussion because I think it'll clean up some of the spider webs in our closet. With that, I'm in.
Thanks. Dan?
Third straight, Jeanene? Bright, sunny day in Portland in the winter. Talk about the world coming to an end. Signs of the apocalypse.
Well,
no, not...
I know. We're on the warm side of the jet stream. But, the other thing is we always have faux spring at end of January, 1st of February. So all the college students from California get pneumonia because the minute the sun goes down, it drops 25 degrees.
Oops. And I just want to add that the Winterhawks are on a 6-game win streak and playing again at 4, so this call can't last past 4 p.m. Pacific time, just so you know.
Yes.
7 p.m.
All right.
Eastern, yeah.
Thanks.
We can do that.
Okay, next is Egberto.
My wife is off to a restaurant to eat some Latino foods with some of my Latino buddies, and I am stuck on a call on a Sunday at 12:43 CST for CP. Do you know how much I like beans and rice and fried plantains? And with that,
I am so sorry. Well, we'll be quick.
Hey, Egberto. Egberto.
Yes.
Love is sacrifice.
Yes, sir.
The nobility of sacrifice. Yes, right. I love it. All right, go back.
All right, so Eric.
Yeah, it is freezing, but I did escape the editing cave last night to go to a party for someone, Rachel Lewis's birthday, who is a public citizen, veteran, social media person. And so it was nice to see that there's a world outside of the internet. And just so you guys know, Jeanene is going to moderate the call today, since I'm the person who raised the question on the conflict of interest in both cases. So I'll be Jeanene and I are kind of swapping roles today. Okay, that's it.
All right, and then when Justin calls in, we'll get his check-in. So as far as I can tell, I'm going to go look at the agenda that just came up, the Coffee Party agenda.
Okay. I didn't add anything. It's just so that we can take notes.
Oh, okay, got it. We got it. Okay, so the document sent out earlier, there were two parts to this conversation, but they both focused on our understanding as a board of conflict of interest, and then what actions we may take or we may plan to take, what direction we go, given those understandings of conflict of interest. And so I think this is what I said in the big marker post is that actual ultimate decisions might be premature today, but understanding our process for coming to decisions and understanding the role, the responsibility, the fiduciary responsibility even of members of the board of directors when it comes to conflict of interest, I think is an important outcome here. So what's our job? And then going forward, how are we going to do that? And we have 3 documents that seem germane to that conversation. One of them is the Viridian Coffee Party Viridian plan. It's called the RF Program Plan. I have been trying to sort of draft out the state of that project so that people could see. And at the bottom, I asked a question. Another document relevant to this is one you should have had shared with you very recently, which came from Linda Park, and it's a conflict of interest policy for Coffee Party USA, and it involves both a policy interpretation of what we saw in the bylaws and an actual conflict of interest questionnaire. I don't think I didn't see any. I don't think the board that I've been sitting on for 2 years approved this as a policy document. I think that it might have been submitted to the transition team. I don't know. But whether we accept this as policy or adopt it as policy, I think it's germane to what we're talking about today. And then there's a document called Article 7, Conflict of Interest, where I took Eric's post out of Big Marker and put it into a doc so we could comment or type in. And as I read through it, the red questions are my questions, and anyone else is able to add questions. And so I think the place to begin with is this COI document, and the whole, that conversation needs to be what?
Okay with my son.
Somebody has a toddler. Somebody has a toddler.
Dan has a question, Jeanene.
Okay, Dan.
Thank you. So yeah, it's fun. I'm like actually looking at the board. I've never seen this board before, but it's fun. I don't recall seeing, nor do I have in my Google Drive any document. The document you talked about from Linda Park. I don't. I
think I sent it to your email address. That's like Sage something.
Okay. Okay. So it wasn't shared. Okay, there it is. Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maybe everybody should. How about this, Jeanene? Can you just take a moment and put links to all three documents in the Coffee Party Board agenda? Because I just sent everybody a link to that, and then if they go there, they'll see all three documents linked.
Oh, in the agenda? Okay.
Yeah, in the normal Coffee Party agenda. I would have done it, but I don't have access to all of them that allows me to share.
Oh, no, that's fine. I'll do it right now. There's one. Which one is it? I don't know anymore. Here's the second.
I just want to reinforce something that Jeanene said, that the real binding sort of governing language is in the bylaws. And this other document that has, to our knowledge, and Jeanene and I have been around a long time, hasn't been adopted by the board, but is, I guess we could take it as recommended, since Linda knew immediately to share this with us. That's that is an interpretation of the bylaws. It's not the bylaws.
Well, right, and I'm going to presume that this was produced by the board development group. It was submitted to somebody. It may have been the transition team. And so a lot of the board development group is a very impressive bunch of people, and they would have spent some time thinking about this. And so as soon as after our meeting yesterday, I directed questions to Linda Park, and she sent me this doc. So, and none of us were shared on it. So I fixed that. Actually, Eric had been shared, I think, maybe. But I couldn't tell how long ago. So I'm glad that they did this, because this saves us a lot of time. It's easier to edit something sometimes than it is to just start from scratch. And the people who produced this draft are highly capable and were immersed in the question at the time. Plus, most of them have experience with private nonprofits of one kind or another.
Right.
So these are invaluable documents. So because I'm trying to think of the best place to start here. Eric, I know that what we're really shooting for is what is our job and how do we execute that responsibility? We can talk about Viridian as a warm-up, if you like, or we can just talk about this document that Linda sent. But what's your pleasure? Is it better to start with something we're actually doing right now and refer back to Linda's document, or to go here? Anybody have a preference?
I think we should probably do Linda's document first, because we have two, unless we do both of them before we look at the document.
Okay.
Well, hold on. One thing. I'm going to be back home here in about 10 minutes. So I haven't even looked at this doc. I definitely want to take a good hard look at it. But outside of that, if you want to start with something that isn't looking over a document and editing it when I'm not able to see it, I don't know.
Okay.
I just don't want to miss anything.
Well, I tell you what, this one's pretty. You've seen the conflict of interest doc, and so I think we can talk about that one. So let's start there, because I think what we first have to agree is that we actually have a responsibility here to either adopt a policy, create a policy, or not. I mean, that's, I guess, one of our decisions. If you go to the conflict of interest, or you remember it, as Cameron's going to do, you're going to see that basically our bylaws include boilerplate from IRS-accepted examples. I went to a couple of others. I went to the National Institutes of Health. I went to, because they have conflict of interest things with their awardees, et cetera. I went to a couple other sites. They all had statements like this. And the things that are in red, the questions in red are things that came to my mind as I was saying, if I had to execute this, if I saw this as my job to execute, what do I not know that would make it possible for me to do that? And so the first one was, there's a statement there that says compensation includes direct and indirect remuneration as well as gifts or favors that are not insubstantial. So I don't know what insubstantial means, but a financial interest is not necessarily a conflict of interest. And so my question in red is, when is a financial interest not a conflict of interest? And that was the question I asked Linda. Then you go on to procedures, and basically, I heard a hand. Cameron.
Yeah, no. Please finish. I thought you were finished with that thought. I had a statement to that. Please continue. I'll wait till the end.
Okay.
Jeanene, real quick, where are your red questions? Where are your red questions? I don't see you in your red questions.
On the COI, in the COI doc, they're embedded in the doc.
The first question come about 6 paragraphs down. And after Article 7.
Yeah, 1B3.
Okay, well, that's okay. I'm following verbally, so go on, Jeanene.
Okay, so there's a question, and that's an example of the kind of conversation we should have. Then basically said if you feel or suspect there's a conflict of interest, you have to disclose. And the procedure of disclosing is not an admission that there's a conflict of interest. The procedure of disclosing is saying we need to have a conversation about whether or not this is a conflict of interest. Is that clear what the difference means? Once you disclose, you then, there's some decision-making process where board people review, collect information, review information, and then sort of make a ruling. And then what they do is in Part B where it says addressing. How do we do this? And so I think the first question for us to entertain is this something that we see as a need for this group to spend time with today or any time? And so, listen, I want to, 1 for this is valid and we should pursue it. 2 for this is not valid, we should not pursue it. And 3 is I don't know yet.
We're going.
This is just a temperature gauge vote, Jeanene?
Is it what?
It's like a temperature gauge vote.
Yeah, temperature gauge. Okay, so Dan and Cameron aren't sure yet. The rest of us feel like we should continue. So that says continue. So the next question becomes how do we interpret these rules, and where do we take a question about conflict of interest? We can continue to look at the COI document, but I think that what we're served by is the document that Linda shared, which is they all start with C's, so all my blue tabs just have C's on them. Okay, here it is, conflict of interest policy. And I don't want to spend too much time on process, but I want to say is that I think that if we review conflict of interest issues, we should be guided by a document like this. If we have inquiries about if you want to disclose, which is asking the question, is this a conflict of interest, that they've provided a form. And I guess my question from all of this is, can anyone request disclosure, because I didn't see that here, and who then, I guess the audit committee is, it says here the president of the board and the chair of the board, we don't have those two, would convene an audit committee. So my question becomes, who should be looking at this? Should the entire board together be looking at this, or should we find a group of experts to look at this for us? Any thoughts on this?
Well, I have a hand up, but it's...
Oh, I don't see it up. Go ahead, speak.
Oh, sorry. No, yeah, it's actually from a bit earlier. So if you don't mind, and I don't want to derail this, but I would like to take a step, up. So if this is a 5,000-foot overview question, I'd like to ask a 10,000-foot overview question. And my question is based on my belief of what I would like to see as a guiding philosophy for this conversation. And that is, I think we have two choices here. Well, no, I think we're determining one thing, right? Where are we going to set the bar for ethics in the board of directors of the coffee party? And we could do it something like this, like what we're pursuing right now, which is looking at it almost as a legal matter, and in the light of if somebody brought lawsuits against us, we could do it that way. But I personally would rather set the bar higher. I would rather enact rules and procedures, especially around Viridian, to where nobody could say, I mean, even on a flight of fancy, you could just not say that anything was going wrong here, that there was any corruption here. I frankly would rather not go through the legal exercise and set the bar higher and not worry about the legalities. But that's just me.
Well, so you're saying that if you met the standard, the reasonable man test, so to speak, if you met that standard, then I agree with you that we are allowed to go farther.
Yeah.
So then
to me, corruption is about a sniff test. Does it stink? Does it stink even mildly? No. Well, then there can't be any corruption. I mean, that's how it should be. I don't even want a whiff of stink.
Does anybody want to, Eric, go ahead and address that.
Okay. I agree with that, but I just want to make it clear, and I'm sure Dan also would agree, we're not saying that anybody on this call or on the board or even has ever served on the board is corrupt or doing anything inappropriate. We are just reviewing our responsibilities, and in terms of the decision-making process, that Dan is right, just is above any reproach at all because of the process that we took. And so there actually are guidelines in the bylaws what process should be taken if we decide that there is the potential that someone could look at it this way. We're not saying that anybody actually is corrupt, but we want to set, I think, I agree with Dan, as high a standard as possible. For one thing, because we talk about fighting corruption quite a bit, but also if we set the super high standard, what we're really saying is that we're trying to avoid any appearance of corruption, and we're really not accusing anybody of corruption.
Yes, that is correct. Lesson are the peacemakers, of which Eric Byler is one of them.
Excellent. Well, and I got to say, the caveat I want to add to that, while I'm in full agreement, is that I think we did a very ethical thing yesterday. We followed procedure to do it. We did our due diligence and exercised our responsibility as a board. Now, will the outcome of what we did yesterday stink to some people? It might. But that thought, the standard, it can't even stink, is impossible. Because there's just going to be people who want to believe. There are people on my post every day that want to believe if the coffee party prints it, it's a lie. So you go, thanks for sharing, and you move on. So I don't think, we're kind of saying, is the board of directors the definitive nose? Are we the definitive taste test for stink? Because you can't have nobody. You can't have nobody like everything we do. No, it's just not going to happen. So I appreciate what you mean, but I can't agree with what you said. Does that make sense?
Well, we can aim for it, though, Jeanene.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying don't aim for it, but it's not the ultimate test, because the ultimate test will be, the ultimate test should not be, what does Dell think of us doing this? That is not my test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So just to clarify really quickly, what I mean is amongst us. I mean amongst us here on the board. Not right. You can't please everybody. That's crazy talk.
Right. Okay, perfect. Then I'm 100% agreement, because I do think that it's our job to sample aware, so to speak, and decide if this is good enough for us. Okay. So we have two examples in front of us. One of them is the Viridian example. And I think I scared the bejeebins out of Eric at a meeting recently, and that's where his enlightenment about conflict of interest came from. Because I was asking very hard questions of the Viridian people about conflict of interest and about what would pass muster. The other one is that we have a concern about use of our social media assets. And I think that these are both interesting questions because they give us an opportunity to sort of grow into this job, to grow into this job with real life examples, not being theoretical, being actual, but trying to apply what we think is the best strategy for managing it. And so at this point, I don't want to keep talking, but what I was trying to do is just lay a groundwork for we're trying to identify policy, we're trying to identify procedure, and we have an opportunity to do that with two things in our hands today. And the reason I'm moderating is because Eric brought both of these questions to the board. And the questions to the board is as close to disclosure, a disclosure statement as we have so far. And so then, Eric, I'm going to ask you what you would like to see the next thing we do be. And others, do we need to talk more about our responsibility? Do we need to talk more about procedure? Or should we begin to play in the sandbox called two issues before us?
I feel clear on the procedure, but I have been studying it for a couple of weeks. So if others have questions, I'll try to outline it as I understand it. I want to put it. What does that sound? I thought okay.
I'm sorry. It's the chat.
Okay. I thought I had muted, but never mind. Anyway, the way I see it is that when this kind of situation arises, no matter who brings it forward, it's our responsibility to have a discussion with all members of the board about whether there is a particular member of the board who has a financial interest that might present a conflict with the interests of the coffee party as a whole. And then if we, after having a discussion about that, if we decide that the answer is yes, then what happens then is we set policy as to the arrangements that we have with the entity in which there may be a conflict of interest for one or more board members. We set that policy in a certain procedure that's slightly different from what we would normally do, basically in order to ensure that we're making decisions in the best interest of the coffee party. And what it basically boils down to, it's somewhat similar to what happened yesterday. We deliberate as a full board until we reach a point where the board needs to deliberate without the person who we have identified as having a conflict of interest. And then policy is set with votes. And the votes that the person who is identified as having the conflict of interest abstains from.
And Cameron has his hand up. Dan had 3 to agree with Eric.
Okay, let me unmute Cameron here.
Okay.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, we got you. Okay.
So,
go ahead, Cameron.
All right. So, well, are we going to start this discussion now, or are we just having the discussion about the discussion?
I threw that out there to see if there's common ground on how we understand what the bylaws instruct.
Okay. All right. So, my question and my statement actually isn't really addressing what the bylaws currently say. So, if we're going to just discuss that, I'll rescind my number one until we have an open discussion to discuss this.
Okay, and so actually what I'm trying to do is move us from creating the background. I tried to create the background for this, and I really would like to move into reality.
Okay.
My preference would be that we use our two examples as our platform for learning how to do this. I think we can only go so far today, but there are definitive points of completion that we could reach. But what Eric just pointed out is that if there's serious questions about what policy is, what procedure is, we certainly could bring those up in the process of trying to address these issues, and we could talk about them independently. And so we're trying to get permission here to move on. Dan.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. So here's a suggestion. Before moving into Viridian, which is what might be, we already have certain examples on the table, right, of current activities that could be possibly considered conflict of interest. Should we discuss those as a way of setting a baseline of how we will judge Viridian?
Well, yes and no. I mean, if that is a strategy, we could start talking about things that we do now, apply this test that apply this new information that we're all sort of getting comfortable with here, and then see how that works out. I'm not saying we can't do that. There are two things before us, and that we can. But go ahead and, make your case. I think I slowed everybody down by trying to be sure that we understood what we were here to do today, and I feel on to do that.
We're going around in circles here. Look, there are two things that Eric called this meeting for. One, it's about Viridian, and one, it's about Egberto, me posting on the site, and two, it's about Viridian. If you want to get started in something fact-based, we can start with Egberto Willies, since it's a simple. I have a simple answer for that, and that is, I don't have there's no relationship between EgbertoWillies.com and Coffee Party. EgbertoWillies.com is where I blog, is where I put my thoughts, and whenever I blog, that's what goes on to the Coffee Party website. I don't know how COI even comes into play. When we go ahead and write a post from the New York Times or from the Washington Post or from any other thing that somebody puts a link to, it is no different than posting from any other site on the planet. So I'm concerned that there is some cloak to bring my website into this discussion of conflict of interest, because it has no place here.
So can I finish now, because that's exactly where I was going, but I wanted to broaden that spectrum. So, but if we want to go right to this, because here's the thing, because we have a platform, right? Where we have hundreds of thousands of people that come to a website every week. We have a media outlet. Now, if you're using that media outlet, Egberto, to promote EgbertoWillies.com and to get people to go to EgbertoWillies.com, and you make money from that, then there is no doubt that you are gaining an advantage from having access to the platform.
Well,
wait, hold on. Let me finish, please. No different than when Eric comes on and talks about Story of America. No different than when Dan Aronson talks about Party Recon. It's all so that's I think where the baseline needs to be set. Is that a conflict of interest?
And my answer is it's quite simple. It's a simple question. A simple answer. For those people who go to any website that has ads on it, somebody makes a few pennies if they hit a click. But again, that is something not done by the promotion of the particular article or whatever. It has everything to do with the person on the other side of the equation. When you go ahead and you go to New York Times, or let's use one that's public. When you go to NBC, if any one of you have a 401k and you direct traffic to MSNBC, NBC, CBS, or Fox News, if you own stock in that particular company, do you have a vested interest in taking a story there? So what I'm saying is there's no financial interest that one can specify based on this particular activity because it depends on some user action with some ad going forward. It is very different than if I come into Coffee Party and I say I want to promote a book. If I come into Coffee Party and I say I want to promote, use Coffee Party's database to promote something, I have never done that. In fact, not that I haven't only done that, I have not been allowed to do that. I'm one of the few Coffee Party members that have pretty much been banned with a political book of interest that was pretty much banned from this platform. So what I'm saying is based on all the other activities that have occurred over the years in Coffee Party, and I have them all listed. I don't need to go through them right now. The only person in the old Coffee Party that really derived no real financial interest from this stuff was myself. Not because I didn't want to sell my book to the people through Coffee Party as gifts or whatever, but otherwise, my contention is simply there is a vendetta against me putting my views via my site on Coffee Party. There's absolutely at this point no doubt about that. So that is my concern. This is not a conflict of interest. This should not even be on the board.
Cameron and then Eric.
Okay. So, boiling things down to lowest common denominators, that I did a lot of thinking about this last night and this morning even. And what I found out is that when really there's a conflict of interest in any other contact outside of our particular domain, it's that somebody came in to utilize a specific platform in order to gain a monetary gain without that platform gaining a benefit. I think that on many occasions that we tend to wish-wash things out because in this case, if we end up taking salaries as the board of directors, it's a conflict of interest for us working on it, which is kind of reciprocal in how I see it. I think that on many levels we are looking at this from the perspective of if we don't like how something looks or we don't like how something seems to be, that we're not taking a full look at the situation. And then what I mean by that is if there's a financial benefit, if there's a branding benefit, if there is an explosion of good press or bad press or any press whatsoever that brings hits to Coffee Party on top of bringing hits to other websites, whether that be Egberto's or Story of America or Michael Charney, Tea with the Mad Hatter, or any of these things, that it ends up putting us in a position of just looking at the bureaucracy rather than looking at the mission. I think what we really need to start understanding is that if you look at other media outlets, regardless of who they are, whether it be Fire Dog Lake, whether it be Heritage Foundation, that there is always going to be a financial monetary thing that is involved in those organizations. And if we try to just cannibalize how we do our business, we don't get anything done. Now, I understand that this call is about specific things that we need to address in terms of conflict of interest. I understand the concern. I understand why we are looking at it the way that it's being presented. What I don't quite understand is that we are not looking at this from the perspective of what our mission here is. If it's to get money out of politics and anything that gets done, regardless of whether or not that means Egberto Willies gets to have some food on the table because his website gives him a little bit of extra dollars because he has to supplement his time from working at his computer work to do the work that he's doing here, I think that supporting that isn't the worst thing on the planet. I understand that we're worried about the branding of Coffee Party, of how that is perceived in the blogosphere. I get that, Eric, and most definitely I understand where your point is. But in reference to it, if there's a reciprocity from EgbertoWillies.com that promotes Coffee Party and vice versa, and if in the same context from a Viridian perspective, if while we are doing Viridian, yes, I may make a financial gain. Yes, my father may make a financial gain in reference to it, but Coffee Party makes a lot of money in reference to it, then the true essence of conflict of interest, as far as I see it, is muddled. Because it's not like we're doing this specifically just for that reason. And this is why this is such a hard and crazy question for us to ask ourselves, I think. I mean, I'm in the position that I'm in. I'm not, I guess in some respects, I have somewhat of a black eye from this perspective. But in reference to the logical point, take myself out of the situation, I look at it and I say, well, we're taking in $2,000 a month, maybe, in reference to donors giving us money, in reference to, and we got a ton of hits on the website. Anything that pushes the hits out more and brings more traffic to Coffee Party could monetize the advertising on coffeeparty.com. Why aren't we doing anything like that? If we're missing an opportunity here, I don't understand why a conflict of interest question is in place when there's really not a lot of monetary gain that Coffee Party itself is trying to gain from its opportunities. And especially when other people are trying to make the Coffee Party a more profitable and viable thing in the community in order to acknowledge the mission, to succeed in the mission. So with that, I'm going to leave the floor open to discussing that, because I think that Coffee Party itself, when it realizes a gain from a situation, that honestly it's the same as if we were getting paid as board of directors to run the party, and it's the same as if we brought in somebody to do heavy fundraising to bring donors in where we're paying them 10%. I don't see the negative in that. And so if we're creating content, even if it's, I will say this, standards and practices in terms of civility, completely support where you're coming from. If Egberto is saying that Republicans are the devil and that Democrats are angels, I believe that an editing is in order, because I agree that it's polarizing. But in reference to the financial gain from an advertising scenario, as long as the intent here and the actual action that's taken isn't strictly to bring revenue straight to him and not give any benefit to Coffee Party whatsoever, I think that it alleviates the conflict of interest issue. So with that, I'll yield my time.
I'm going to interrupt now because Justin's on the call. Justin, would you like to check in? Oh, are you muted, Justin?
Yep, sorry, I was on mute. Hey, guys. Yeah, calling in. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. Had a conflict with not knowing what time it was exactly, but happy to join the discussion, and happy Sunday, everyone.
Happy Sunday.
Thanks. Hey, Justin, I just want to let you know that if you go to the Coffee Party board agenda doc in Google Docs, you're going to see 3 docs that we're linked to and we're talking about here today. So you can, if you're where you can use the computer, you could bring those up.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Welcome. All right, so Eric and then Dan. And then
okay, well, Cameron, thanks for bringing up the brand question. Certainly, I don't think I need to disclose that I have an interest in trying to preserve the Coffee Party's brand. It's not just because of the good of the Coffee Party, though. I have to admit, it's difficult for me to present myself as a credible journalist or as a documentarian or as a transpartisan agent or as a person who really believes in creating a safe space for a civil dialogue when there's so many counterexamples per week posted to a page that I'm associated with. So I do have a conflict of interest there. among others, right? For instance, I bring to the board when I want to post something that is asking for donations to Story of America. So nobody is any different than anyone else here. Or certainly Egberto's not guilty of anything that isn't also at play for me. But it is possible for us to be blind to our own interests. Hitchcock proved this in his films. If he put you in the subjective point of view of a character and had you look through a peephole through his eyes, when it came down to actually getting away with murder, you actually you find yourself rooting for him because you connect your own experience to the character's experience. And of course, I'm referencing the film Psycho, but there are tons of other examples in Hitchcock's films and others. So that subjectivity is the reason why, as a board, we need to bring to each other decisions like this when there's a potential that we might be blind to our own self-interest. So Cameron brings up a good point. If Fire Dog Lake or the Heritage Foundation had daily access to our most precious social media resource, it would be a problem, but it wouldn't be a conflict of interest question for the board unless somebody on the board was receiving financial benefit from that arrangement. The reason why I've brought this, and it's true that I object in many ways to the stuff that Egberto has posted over the last several years, but I haven't allowed it to get to a point where there could be some disturbance in the force until now, because for one thing, Egberto's right to say what he wants to say is an important thing to consider. I devised this whole idea of the freedom of authenticity basically to make room for Egberto because I really valued his contributions, and I could see that they were, his views were in conflict with what our mission statement said. And so I tried to expand our mission statement so that it could include people who can be civil most of the time, and certainly Egberto's radio shows are great examples of being civil when talking to people with whom you don't agree, but don't necessarily fit into some of the transpartisan aims that we have. So in the Coffee Party Board of Directors document, I'm posting a couple of indicators of really the only reason why I bring up this question. And that is that in addition to my concern that these posts, being the most frequent posts of any person who contributes to the page, Egberto is up to 9 or 10 per week, and that's more than me or Annabelle or anybody else. They all point to one site. Even when his radio show is promoted, it posts to his Facebook page instead of to Blog Talk Radio, Coffee Party USA Blog Talk Radio. So it's 10 per week that point towards a site that is called EgbertoWillies.com. And if you click on the advertisement page for EgbertoWillies.com, one of the ways that the argument is made that this is a good place to advertise is the 195,000 impressions per month. And if you do some research on where those impressions come from, at different times over the last few years, it's been between 40% and 60% come from Facebook. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's all our page, but you could probably guess that a good significant part of it is from our page, since there aren't other pages that Egberto has access to that have that kind of firepower. The other thing, it's kind of hard to read, but this is a measurement of the ranking in the entire world of websites, and I hope you can zoom in enough to read this. And so I compare Coffee Party and 3 organizations that have a similar goal to have a transpartisan response to the issue of money in politics, and then EgbertoWillies.com. And so what you see is that Egberto is ranked in the 137,000 in the entire world, which is very good. And if you research further, he's in the range of 20,000 in the United States. Public Citizen, which has a very large budget, they have a huge endowment, they have a huge building, and they have a huge staff, but they don't have a Facebook page like we have. They're lagging behind Egberto by about 3,000. And then Common Cause is way down there at 365,000 in the world. Root Strikers, which we all admire, Larry Lessig's group, is down there at 516,000. And then CoffeePartyUSA.com, which actually at one time was in even better standing than EgbertoWillies.com. Coffee Party USA is at 921,000. So the question is, I don't think the question is whether there's a financial interest. I think there clearly is. But the question is, because Jeanene brings up a good point, could it be possible that even though there's a financial interest, it's still in the interest of the Coffee Party to send traffic to EgbertoWillies.com 10 times per week for forever. And my argument would be that this is where the conflict of interest comes in. If you are trying to sell advertising or sell a product or win a political campaign, then the kind of content you would select would be along the lines of a kind of a bumper sticker. It'd be the kind of stuff that might have an inflammatory element to it. And I think it's clear by the number of audience members that Fox News has compared to CNN or PBS, having a more partisan appeal is the kind of thing that might get a click to go to a website. Whereas if you were trying to adhere to the brand promise of Coffee Party, then you might choose different language. You might choose language that would invite people to ask themselves a question, or you might ask them, well, you certainly wouldn't necessarily point to certain people or certain parties or certain people who fall under certain parties or certain races or anything like that, because you want everyone to feel comfortable entering into this space for deliberative dialogue. And that was sort of what we promised our members, and that's what we promised when we launched the Coffee Party. And so what happens is that when each day when Egberto has to choose between the kind of language that would best serve that number, 195,000 impressions per month, which helps with some financial interest, between that and what would actually help preserve Coffee Party's brand promise and allow us to do other things like raise money to support Coffee Party's efforts with our own integrity intact, or to encourage other people to be part of the conversation who might not be as liberal as Egberto and I, frankly, are. Those things become harder because each day, actually more than once a day, 10 times per week, we suffer from that conflict of interest. And my last point is, this is what Michael Charney tried to tell us before he resigned, was that even he had the temptation to put more inflammatory stuff on the site and to do Republican bashing, because he has his own frustrations with it, certainly the Tea Party wing of the Republican Party. But he said we needed to fight that urge, because it wasn't a financial urge for Michael, because he never posted his own website to Coffee Party. If he was going to do his writing, he would put it in Scoop It first, or the Coffee Party Scoop It system, and then post it to Coffee Party's Facebook page. But it wasn't because of a financial interest. He just had a natural inclination to want to get more attention and have a better conversation or whatever, just to have the number of shares and hits or whatever higher. So we all have to fight that urge to put the stuff that's more inflammatory. And I think if we can agree that there is a financial interest here, and I think that's demonstrable, and also agree that the kind of messaging that promotes clicks and promotes a certain percentage of our audience to say, yeah, let's, hammer the Republicans, I'll click or whatever, or they might just be outraged and they'll click because of that. Whatever the audience is that's more engaged in this sort of adversarial approach to talking about politics, by servicing only that section of our community, we're doing a disservice to the rest of our community, and I think we're doing a disservice to Coffee Party's brand promise.
Direct response?
Well, hang on. There were two hands before you, Dan and Jeanene. I'm willing to surrender my position. Dan, did you want to speak before Egberto, or do you want to wait?
Egberto. Let's let Egberto go.
Knock yourself out, Egberto.
Thank you very much, Dan. I'm impressed that you did all the research to find out how much traffic my website have and where the traffic is coming from, and the methodology that you use to attempt to determine what that is all about. I am not the type that comes out anywhere as far as tooting my horn, but I must remind you that I am a featured writer at Daily Kos, and as such, my stuff gets featured on the Daily Kos Facebook page as well. I must alert you that I'm also a featured writer at Addicting Info, which also brings the traffic from both websites. I must tell you that there are quite a few other institutions on Facebook. So the impression that you attempt to make that Facebook is somehow that major source of traffic, yes, Facebook is one of the sources of traffic. Secondly, there are two ways of earning income on the internet with these stuff, and the most effective one is click per count, which is something that is subjected by the person who comes in. Now, I find it ironic that early on when I started blogging with Coffee Party, the reason I went to EgbertoWillies.com was because of the censorship that I was getting. I don't know if you remember this, and some of you on the board, this is before you guys were on the board, was because of some of the censorship that I continuously got when I posted, which I posted every day as well, or almost every day, from coffeepartyusa.com. And the reason I went to EgbertoWillies.com with Coffee Party was to give that level of indirection. In other words, if for some reason, first of all, let me be frank. I have passed a lot of my information through quite a few people that that will cop to it being fact-based, whatever it is that I write. But that said, I actually came to EgbertoWillies.com because of the censorship that I felt from from CoffeePartyUSA.com. I think it is ironic that as opposed to saying, using the skills that I've developed, I've been to classes, I've been to other places on how to use social media, how to use the internet to actually attract an audience, as opposed to saying, let's work with me to go ahead and see if there are other things we can do within Coffee Party to bring Coffee Party up to these types of levels. And the assumption that you make that somehow it means to have that kind of thing, you have to be completely off the wall, I find that defeating. Because if one thing that could have been used, instead of bringing up a conflict of interest decision or whatever, when you went ahead and did that research on my website, I would have expected, if I were the one doing the research, I would have called you up and said, hey, Eric, how the hell did you accomplish that? But instead, it is used as a hammer on me. I mean, I just find all of this really ironic because that's what it is. I am wide open. If you look for me all over the internet, I'm one of those that don't hide behind firewalls, which a lot of companies, including a lot of the right-wing companies, hide behind firewalls. Everything about me is on the internet. So there's nothing anybody wants to know about me, they can. Let's go a little bit further. We talk about branding. Cameron spoke about branding. I'm in 4 major organizations: Daily Kos, Coffee Party, Move to Amend, Battleground Texas, actually, and a couple others. Within my site, I make sure to have regions for these guys as well. I can't say the same for, let's say, Story for America, who actually tries to be insular from Coffee Party. I'm a proud person of Coffee Party. In fact, if you look at whenever I have a dialogue on Coffee Party with even some of the things that, let's take a look at the thing that was removed this week that really got me upset. You removed some good dialogue that actually brought, because I didn't feel like I needed to bite my tongue and this conservative didn't feel like he had to bite his tongue, it really fomented dialogue. I think a lot of what we're saying here, again, as I said, It has very little to do with the actual EgbertoWillies.com, and there's a lot more behind the scenes. And thank you very much.
Dan, and then Eric. I'll step out of this for a minute.
Okay, so since we had a couple of good diatribes on there, I have a couple of things. I'll try to be short, just list them out in bullet form and toss them out there. First of all, I'm much more concerned about the brand than I am about the conflict of interest. I'm not so worried about the money thing. And again, I think there's a bunch of us that are all would be guilty of that if we tried to make that. So I'd rather not that. I'd rather go to the brand thing. So this is not a new conversation when it comes to the branding. Yes, Egberto, your stuff I find to be very fact-based. I find it to be it's sometimes civil, sometimes not so civil, and it's sometimes it's definitely not transpartisan, and a lot of it isn't. I don't think. See, here's where you and I differ. I don't think that in order to be vehemently progressive, you have to be anti-conservative, and that's the thing. Instead of selling the progressive agenda, I see most of your stuff as attacking the right, and there's different ways to go about that. So that's one thing. Secondly, I just want to point out John Bleakley is a libertarian, and the libertarian is not a conservative. He's a half a conservative, and he's half super conservative, and he's half super liberal. If you look at what the libertarians are about. So again, to lump him in as a conservative, not the right thing. Now, thirdly, the goal cannot be to maximize the number of hits we get and then maximize the number of visitors we get, and we cannot sell out our principles to attain that goal. We have to be true to our principles, or we are nothing. We are nothing. I'm done.
Thanks. 3 to agree from me. Listen, I was going to go straight to Eric, but what I have to say is really tiny because it's very much what Dan just said. And this is my summary here so far. We have no agreements. Implied, or we have implied agreements, but we have no actual agreements with any content creators. So conflict of interest is actually, when you're doing a conflict of interest judgment, you're actually evaluating the agreement for its compliance, not the actions. The actions are separate from the agreement. And then to date, what we're experiencing is a failure to act, both with regard to branding and with regard to conflict of interest. And so just like we sort of took a big step forward in the maturity of this board yesterday, we're kind of taking that same, a different but similar big step forward in the maturity of this board when we sort of see that in absence of agreements, however simple they may be. It's like the civility pledge. We took the civility pledge, that's an agreement, and so we actually have a basis to do something based on that agreement. All these other agreements are very informal, and if challenged, wouldn't do well, right? And so, I think Dan brings us to an interesting place because it's not wrong to ask questions about Egberto's situation or Eric's situation or the Viridian situation. It's never wrong to ask the question. But what we may find is we're not prepared to answer it, and that we need to create the lens through which we look in order to answer that question. And with that, it'll go to Eric and then to Egberto. Thank you.
Okay. I think where Egberto and I really don't agree is just a good example is that I asked Egberto if he could post to his own website less often, so it wouldn't be as dominant. And I made the argument, he didn't care for it very much, but I made the argument that if he didn't feel the pressure to create something new every day or more than once a day to send traffic to his website, maybe he would have more time to write the kind of really thoughtful economic arguments that he used to write when we published them on the Coffee Party USA website. And it's true, I did edit them to make them more in keeping with our values, which led to Egberto being frustrated and posting only to his site. So it's not that that Egberto, I'm never arguing that Egberto tried to arrange this in the way that we have it now, but this is the way we have it now. Egberto's answer to me requesting that he do this less often was no. And so, Jeanene, I guess I sort of disagree with you in the sense that we don't have an arrangement right now. We do. The arrangement is that Egberto has unfettered access without any enforceable guidelines. And the second part of that, I think you guys know, each time Michael or I or Dan have tried to express what the guidelines are in our view, Egberto has either said, I don't agree or I agree, but then continue to post stuff that violates those guidelines. So, you know, the last point is, if it's true, and I'm sure it is true, Egberto, like I said, only 40 to 60% of your web traffic comes from Facebook, they have other outlets to send traffic to your site, then really the harm is not that. There isn't such tremendous harm if you agree to have at least some guidelines from the board of directors on how you can both serve your website and serve the interests of preserving the Coffee Party brand promise.
Was I up next?
Yes, here it's you, Egberto.
Yeah, that is. I think Eric is missing several points on this whole issue with my website. First off, the incident this week was completely a lack of respect. That was number one, okay? That was number one, a complete lack of respect for me as a person. But secondly, as far as my website, as I told Eric in an email in the discussion that we had that I think you were copied on to Jeanene, is that I am not, look, we can have two types of information. We can have information that you see something that Krugman or David writes, David Gregory or the conservative David, you write and you go ahead and you post that link to the site. That's fine. I don't see myself as that person in Coffee Party because that's not who I am. That's not who I ever was. I actually read tens to dozens of different articles a day, interpret them, and put them out there. I am one of many voices out there in the field. Many of us, there are many voices out there. Eric's contention that I am dominant on the Coffee Party page, it's not by choice. The reality is, yes, I am being accused for being consistent. It's not that I'm pressured to write every day. It's that I want to write every day. There is a hell of a lot of stuff happening every day, and those 500,000 people on Coffee Party site, those 210,000 people on Daily Coast site, those 60,000 people on Move to Amend site, and I can go site after site, being liberal, over almost 1 million people on that site. The reality is, when I write, I don't just copy or mimic. I interpret the stuff, and it comes from the years of experience I have in the political sphere. Now, it is true that it's my point of view. I've been accused at times for being a bit over the top. I think I would cop to that probably 4 or 5 times, including the time that I think Jeanene called me up while I was on the way to the airport. That one was done in haste, but I don't cop to, first of all, I found it condescending when Eric makes a comment like, maybe if you took more time, you would be more thoughtful. That's condescending. Do you ever tell Krugman that? Do you ever tell any of these other people that? No. And so but it seems quite easy to tell somebody like me that. Oh, maybe if you're more thoughtful. I'm very thoughtful. Thank you very much. And other people have quite liked my thoughtfulness thus far. So I don't accept that. I don't cop to that. Now, again, as I stated, the reason that I post this way is I don't mimic. I don't just copy stories. I read stories and I present a point of view. And if you take a look at not only the Coffee Party pages, but the other pages that I go, the several other pages, probably a dozen plus those who actually syndicate my stuff, it is actually taken, and even some conservatives like it. I find it also amazing that somebody like our Michael Stafford, who once upon a time would balk at some of the things that I wrote about, somehow has now seemed to mimic a lot of what I write about. And in fact, I had him on the show a couple weeks ago, and it's something that's quite obvious. So what I'm saying is, I think if we're really true to ourselves, it's a detriment, this type of censorship, if you will, or this attempt at some type of censorship. As long as you are there to hold hands and carry folks along, that is how you get change. You don't get change from just trying to do platitudes, and that's what I constantly say. If you are not making waves, you're not effecting change. And the reason why is change is not easy. Nobody wants to change their mind. When somebody tries to change my mind, well, I mean, they have it. There are a whole lot of times that they have it. In fact, let me. I'm gonna shut up in a minute, but I need to say something interesting. And this is about Annabelle. When I saw her, I was a very left partisan, and I think I told you this, Cameron. Very left partisan. And not until I saw Annabelle's video did I feel myself willing to entertain being in something like Coffee Party. Unfortunately, what I'm starting to see is the same kinds of the same kinds of directions that you have on both extremes. We're almost having this discussion here, where it is sort of, if you don't toe this specific line, you're not one of us. No, I entertain all the lines, and I'm a liberal, and I make sure to tell folks that all of the time so that there's always full disclosure. But at the same time, I make sure to entertain a conversation. And not once can anybody tell me while I am talking to people on our site or any other site that I've been rude, I've been uncivil, or anything like that. I can't say the same for our founder, but I have never been uncivil in any of the articulations that I've had on the site. So I find, Eric, look, I like you, but I think you guys have, you talk about something, you're using Hitchcock and looking through the pinhole. I think when it comes to me specifically, you guys have a pinhole that you're looking through.
I had Dan and Cam next, but I didn't know which one put up their hand first, and then Eric. So Dan or Cam, do you know which one? Okay, Dan.
It was Dan.
It was? You sure? You
yeah, it was
gone
you.
In a while.
I watched. Yeah, I saw.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't gone in a while, but you know.
All right, I'm going to be quick. Egberto, I love you to death. You know I love you to death. But you got to listen to yourself, dude. You've used words now, vendetta, condescending. You've said in previous conversations with me about, I said you got to tone down the rhetoric when you were on your tear about attacking the Republicans who were trying to kill Obamacare. You said, I don't care. Lives are at stake. So I get your commitment. I love your commitment. I love your passion. But it's indicative of what you're doing. And when Michael Charney, who to me was deliberative and maybe the least emotional person we had on the board, maybe other than John Cashin, and I just didn't know John that well, so maybe I'm wrong, makes the comment about one of your blogs, it pole vaulted over the line of civility. That's when I start taking notice. And so I'm not sure exactly why you say you never done or said anything uncivil in your exchanges, but it's one thing to have a conversation with somebody, like when you're on the radio, and you can have that back and forth. But when you blog and you just put it out there, it's kind of the same as, you know, I'm pulling the pin on the grenade, I'm opening the door, I'm throwing it in the room, and I'm closing it. It doesn't have the same. There's not the back and forth, right? So it's just a different way of presenting it, and in a different medium. And to me, it requires a different approach. And I just wish you would just tone down the rhetoric, because again, nothing wrong with your viewpoints; they're valid. It's just the way you present it can be very inflammatory. And That's fine, maybe for some of your other sites, but we have to stay true to our brand. So now I'm repeating, so I'll shut up.
Okay, we're going to go to Cameron and Eric, but I want to insert something really quickly. I just looked at my meeting announcement. It said that this would be a 1-hour meeting. We're already at an hour and a half, and so I feel like I need permission. If we're going to continue, we need permission to continue from everyone. I'm going to drop everybody's hands since I have them written down. If you're willing to continue, would you put up 1? I'm assuming 30 minutes, so we'd be done. And if you're not, would you put up a 2? Egberto and I have, okay, I just didn't, I was looking, not voting. So, okay, we're going to continue for 30 more minutes. So informed by that, I'm taking everybody's hands down. And Cameron, you're next, followed by Eric.
So I love the fact that we're talking about inflammatory rhetoric and that we have to protect the brand. So what I really want is, in the moment of civility, evidence of that. I want to know, in what way does some of the actual rhetoric that gets stated, because things are interpretable individually. Everything is. And they can be taken from a left perspective or a right perspective or center perspective or an up and down perspective, however you want to see it. But, unless there is a formal feedback that shows it, whether it be comments about it or that there aren't comments about the statement and comments for it in reference to what statements that can get made, then we're in a position here where we as a board, 6 people, are judging the work of one that gets sent out to the masses. In other words, we're sitting as the Supreme Court. And, the real essence of this is we're just 6 people looking at this through our own eyes and how we see it. I can understand if we don't have specific things in order in terms of policy or editorial guidelines in order, where the lines can get gray. And so if the real solution here is for us to find solutions to the issues where people are getting angry, I want to see 2 things happen from this. That we really put down editorial guidelines as to how civil dialogue is stated and that we sign off on those things. Therefore, there's a legal tender to that. And at the same time, I want to see evidence from whatever side. I remember some of the stuff that people have said about some of the posts that you've had, Egberto. I understand why people will say some of the things they do. But the true essence of it is I've read a bunch of what Egberto has written. And the problem here is that in his writings, there are really good points that need to be made. And the other side to it is that it just comes from a liberal perspective. I don't think that we should be attacking the other side. I agree with that. And I don't think that they should be attacking us in that same side. And I hate the fact of using the term sides here, but I think that's the way this is being framed. But in reference to it, we need to ensure that there are, if we're going to have complaints about how somebody writes something, that there's editorial guidelines. And if there aren't editorial guidelines, then we should be saying to ourselves that we need to go pound sand, because it's not right for us to make judgment calls based upon our own personal views without any guidelines being offered on the table. So with that, I might be completely off base here because I don't write on the Coffee Party blog, at least that often. But when it comes down to it, I want to make sure that certain elements of what we do are standardized. And I think if there's a complaint here, that we should standardize it. With that, I yield my time.
Thanks, Cam. Eric?
Okay, well, thank you, Cameron. Yeah, I think the question before us right now really isn't, is there evidence that the posts have damaged the brand? But I think that's something that we should investigate. And the question before us is, do we have an interested party with regard to the arrangement between Coffee Party USA and EgbertoWillies.com that has a financial interest that is not the Coffee Party USA interest, but is their own interest? Is that true? And if so, when we create this policy, okay, and I think I could argue that we have a policy it's on our website. When you click on who we are, there's all kinds of stuff about a civility pledge. There's a mission statement. There's all kinds of stuff that kind of define who we promise to be. I think that's clear. The only thing we've really struggled with is how do we balance that with our respect for Egberto's right to be himself. And it's a notion that I came up with myself to make room for Egberto. As I said, this spirit of authenticity, let people be themselves as long as they're civil. Okay, so that's the question before us. Are we going to determine today, or maybe after some further discovery, maybe after Egberto lets us know, what kind of money we're talking about here and that sort of thing, but are we going to determine that when we do make a very simple, the thing where we're at odds is I actually asked Egberto if he could do this website promotion 3 times a week instead of 10. Okay, and the answer was no. So the question before the board is, does the board have a responsibility to set guidelines like those, like that one there, okay? Or if you look at it from Egberto's perspective, does the board have a right to? And then the other thing I wanted to say is that, Dan, the analogy about the grenade, let me just put it another way that's a little bit more positive. When Egberto hosts his radio show and he has conservatives talking to him on the other line, he is the model of civility. He's fantastic. That is the first thing that I loved about Egberto when I recruited him to become part of our family. He's dynamite. Okay? So it's not about who Egberto is. He certainly has the skill to uphold Coffee Party values. Okay? The reason why I brought this to you is that when there's also an interest that involves sort of the clickability of the bumper sticker or the, is it outrageous in the Howard Stern or kind of way or whatever, when there's also that interest at play, then Egberto doesn't perform in the same way. So you see that the conflict of interest, which really doesn't exist on the radio show, does not affect his conduct at all. It is the model of civility. He's right. But probably a better record than Annabelle. Maybe not on the radio, but if you average out some things that she's emailed to people. Okay, but when you do apply it to this one action he takes, which is posting content from our Facebook page to his website, that's where the conflict of interest manifests. That's where I think Coffee Party suffers from the conflict of interest. That's my argument.
Three degree from Dan. Cameron put it before. This better be good, Cam.
Listen, I hardly ever use 4s. I hardly ever use them, and this is just a necessity.
That's right.
That being the case, Eric, then in what context does Story of America's fundraising from Facebook, from our website, from our brand, play into this as a part where the damage of our brand is that Story of America raised, $11,000 some odd dollars off of the fact that they've utilized a resource that Coffee Party had. It was brought to the board's attention here, granted. But, the other side to this has been that Story of America benefited wholeheartedly from the Coffee Party relationship that it has had with us. And the real truth of this is, if we want to go down, spite for spite, that there is a conflict of interest in that same context with you being on the board from this perspective. Not in a bad way, but in the respect of how this works. If we're going to start talking about this, then it goes down the same road. And it goes the same way with me with Viridian. It goes the same way with Michael Charney with his book. And it goes the same way with Justin and Big Marker. And it goes the same way with Jeannie in whatever context she wants to see it. But if we open up this door, we have to open it up completely. So with that, I'll yield my 4.
Okay, so it goes Dan, Jeanene, then Egberto.
Oh, I thought I was okay.
Well, no, it's real simple. Hold on a second, because I can be really quickly. I can be done with this quickly. If we're not going to talk about the brand and any effect of the brand, then I can be done, because that's more where I was going to focus. But if you, Eric, it sounded like you wanted to just focus on the financial thing, so I'll be done, and maybe that's a conversation for another time. But I did want to point out really quickly to Cameron's point. Cameron, Michael Charney did a very extensive survey on this exact subject, and we have the data. So there are data points, just so you know. But I'll be done because this sounds like a different conversation.
It is. Yeah, no problem. Thank you for that.
Go ahead. I yield to Egberto.
Okay. First of all, with regards to financial, Eric, if you want to know, there's not a whole lot of money in clicks. I pay more to Coffee Party at $10 a month or whatever it is my thing is than I make from Coffee Party. So that is moot. Secondly, the state. This is what really gets to me with the way Eric talks, and this directly to you, Eric. When you make a statement like, "Oh, I really like how you sound on the radio," but when you write your articles, somehow, because you have a financial interest in clickability, I guess, you write to get people to your site. No, let me tell, and I've explained this to somebody else in Coffee Party. I don't remember why. And I think it was probably Dan and on Coffee Party radio show, I think I explained that. And my comment was simple. In an era where you mentioned the volume of traffic that all these other major organizations that are funded by a bunch of money make as far as their reach, their reach is small. And the reason their reach is small, I would pretend that they're really there to collect money and not to really accomplish anything. That's my impression of groups like Public Citizens and these other groups. They're there as Washington organizations that have a vested interest in continued, getting money from getting money from the streets. Now, as far as the different things that I've learned in the courses that I've taken, it isn't a financial interest that brings the way a headline that I may write or whatever. It is about getting eyeballs to see the meat of a story. If nobody is listening to you or if you're not reaching anybody, it doesn't matter what kind of message you have, there ain't nobody there. The reason Coffee Party got that big bulk of the time when Annabelle's initial video was out is that at that point in time, the country was yearning after having that big fight for something like that. You know what is the reality? The reality right now is you put out certain types of messages, and people vote with their clicks. People vote with with whether they read you or not. That's the democracy within the movements. People read you, and a lot of the old timers have not been able to see that with social media. One of the people that really understand that is the Obama campaign. And I've been to certain courses on that as well. You have to do things to get eyeballs and then mitigate your message. When Cameron says, yeah, you go into my stuff and it's fact-based, or even Dan says that it's fact-based, the reason why is, yes, it's fact-based. I do not write BS. But the fact of the matter is to draw an audience and then turn that audience as an example. Bill Maher. Bill Maher is a very controversial figure. How did I use Bill Maher to refer to positive messages? I presented Bill Maher as the person to get the eyeballs, and within the message I spoke about, but we have to work on not making masculinity or rather not making this issue a masculine issue, but females and males as well can be strong. And the other message in there was about bullying. That is why it got picked up by many other sources. I mean, so I guess what I'm saying is your first initial reaction is Egberto is writing or putting headlines this way for a financial interest. Why did you have to think the least about me as opposed to doing this to actually attract eyes? Take a look at the statistics on Facebook. You did some research on Facebook and see how it is that we get those numbers up. We keep those numbers down with the new Facebook algorithm, all the things drop. So no, this is not, it isn't about branding or whatever. I think I do darn well with the brand. When I go out there and I'm in the liberal sphere with the Green Party or I'm in the liberal sphere with the Democracy Convention or whatever, I think I hold the Coffee Party values very well, because when we are in meeting, it's like, hey, be careful with him because, he's in that transpartisan kind of thing. So I think that alone speaks for itself.
Thank you. I'm going to insert myself. It's to me, I'm sorry, Dan has a 4. Go ahead, Dan.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to narrow this down. So Egberto, you just called the question. So what are we willing to do to get more eyeballs on the story? And that's what we're talking about here is no, we can't sell out our principles just to get more eyeballs on the story. We can't.
That's not what I said.
Otherwise, we're no better than the 1% media that we all rail against on a regular basis. We can't do it.
That's not what I said.
Right. So let me give one really quick example. Egberto and I went around about a post a long time ago, but we actually talked to each other about it. And basically my concern at the time was not his post. It was the lead to his post. And, what I asked of him then was, if the lead to your post can meet the branding criteria of our site, it doesn't matter to me what's on your page. You're linking to it. You're going to have X percentage of people that will actually make that link, whatever. So there are really 2 issues there. But it almost doesn't, so that is a branding conversation that I did. It was a branding conversation. It was not a conflict of interest question. But I will say from this, from the document that I put out, the conflict of interest doc, is that one of the questions in red is what does not insubstantial mean? In other words, compensation includes direct and indirect remuneration as well as gifts or favors that are not insubstantial. So if Egberto is donating $10 a month and making $7 a month, the conflict of interest may not be the conversation. However, it is never wrong to disclose or ask the question, and then it is never wrong to answer it. You know what I'm saying? So I think all of this conversation is productive because we're sort of sussing out how do we ask these questions and what are the questions, and is this or is this not a conflict of interest? Is this or is this not branding? Similar. I also want to point to the fact that Justin has dropped off. So
no, he's on.
Did he come back?
No, I called him in a 3-way call.
Okay. Oh, excellent. Thank you very much. Then Justin is here. I just wanted to let people know that if it made a difference, he wasn't, but he is. Okay, so all hands are down. Are there hands?
Yeah, one.
Eric.
That's what I was wondering.
And then Cameron.
Well, I'd love to hear from Justin, but I thought Cameron made my point well, that anytime a director has a financial interest in an arrangement between a coffee party and an outside entity, that it is our duty, that's my feeling, to bring that before the full board so that we make sure that whatever arrangements we agree to are in the interest of the coffee party, and that the person who has the financial interest recuse themselves from the vote. And according to our bylaws, it also says that the person with the financial interest also should, it should be an option for the board to deliberate without that person on the call when they make that policy. So that's the only question before us. And so, if you want to apply that to Story of America, without actually being very familiar, actually not without being familiar at all with the conflict of interest policy, I just, I don't know, I just somehow felt like that was what I ought to do, to ask the board to vote. And it was interesting because somebody, it might have been Dell, was saying, Eric, you can vote, why not vote? And then I was like, okay, I'll vote. And then Dan said, no, Eric, you should not vote. And then I said, thank you, Dan. You know what? I will not vote. And that's how we went about it in that case. So all I'm really arguing is that regardless of who the person is, and regardless of whether the content is in keeping with our values or not, although I think that where we can say the Coffee Party suffers from the conflict of interest in this case does have to do with values and brand promise. But in any case, before we get to determining that, the first thing we have to ask is there the conflict of interest? And if so, should we follow this procedure, which I sort of independently stumbled upon without being, I'm ashamed to admit, very familiar with conflict of interest guidelines in our bylaws. But since those guidelines are there, and since we now all know about them, I think that we do need to ask ourselves, do we have a right or do we have a responsibility to create these kinds of arrangements in a way that protects the interests of the Coffee Party, its brand, its members, and really our asses in terms of how we represent ourselves to the people who we're responsible to, our members.
Cameron.
All right, so I think we've come to actually a good tipping point on this. Like, here's my point. The term conflict of interest, I think, is kind of a moniker, because our thought process when we start thinking of conflict of interest is corruption, and that's not really the case here. The point that I think that needs to be made is that when we have to understand conflict of interest, and back to square one, Jeanene, is that we need to really understand and define what that really means here. In terms of, if we bring this to the board and there's a full disclosure of monetary gain and that this is what's going to happen and the board is in agreement with it anyway and the person abstains from that vote and the board approves of it, then there cannot be a statement that there is a conflict of interest on it. But that being granted, we absolutely need to have a concrete understanding that when people bring something to the board and certain things are put out saying, well, we'll do this if you do that, then those things need to be adhered to. And I think I addressed this with Eric the last time I spoke with him, is that Story of America, in reference to being able to utilize our Facebook page and database in order to facilitate a financial raise through their fundraising mechanism, they were going to do a fundraising email for us as an entity, as a nonprofit entity. And in that regard, we were supposed to have that by today, and we don't. So, okay, not a problem with the withdrawing.
That's not true, Cameron.
Okay.
It's not true. I'll post the link
it,
in the board of directors.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
I'm going to post a Google Doc into the board of directors of the letter that Annabelle and I drafted to go out after this meeting. There's one part of it in some ways hinges on this meeting, so that's why I hadn't sent it out yet.
I rescind my statement. Awesome to hear it. Thank you for that. With that, then my last part of my statement is rescinded, and thank you. I yield my time.
Dan, and then me.
I had my hands up.
Oh, I don't see it, Eric. I'm sorry. Go ahead. It's not there now.
Yeah.
Oh, is it Egberto that said it? If it's Egberto, you're after me, Egberto.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, Dan did not have his hand up. Old hand.
Oh, old hand. Okay, so we did Cam. Okay, so here's my quickie thing. I want to answer Eric's question the best I understand. He said, do we have the right or the responsibility to, basically exercise this conflict of interest conversation? My answer is no. We have an obligation to exercise a conflict of interest conversation. And it's just because someone asked the question. So again, I would assert that what we need to do is go through this disclosure procedure, which we are kind of morphing through right now, but the actual judgment about conflict of interest come after the documentation, the due diligence to ascertain. And so, no, not a right, not a responsibility so much as an obligation. Or, in the absence, it's a failure to act scenario. So there you go. And who's next? Egberto.
Yeah, my contention is that EgbertoWillies.com has no relationship with Coffee Party whatsoever. I am simply a blogger. I blog from my own site, EgbertoWillies.com, that goes throughout the country, including Coffee Party. Secondly, to be able to call my website a conflict of interest, one would have, I mean, if somehow I'm branded, there's a question about EgbertoWillies.com being branded conflict of interest, then at that point we have to consider New York Times, Washington Post, and every single time some director posts from one of these particular entities, whether any one of their 401ks or otherwise are invested in these particular papers as well, because that would say it is what I'm saying is that follows the same methodology. This is not this again, as I said, has absolutely nothing to do with conflict of interest. I will cop to Dan's branding if you want to say, well, we want when you post here a little bit more toned down. That's something that you can cop to. As far as conflict of interest, that discussion does not belong here. And if Eric wants, I think what we should do is have a vote and determine if somehow there is a conflict of interest. My contention is once you go up that door and go up that road and label somebody posting from another website a conflict of interest, that's a huge door you're going to be opening. And when you open that door, it's a huge door we're all going to be going through. Because I can tell you that there's a whole lot of, we look at Upworthy, we look at all these other things that fly in the face. It gets rather complicated then.
I see no hands. Other comments?
I'm ready. Yeah, I can. Okay, well, I think that in order to move towards a vote, Egberto, I think we're going to have a little bit of time to talk about it without you on the call. I'm perfectly comfortable. Actually, I shouldn't say perfectly comfortable. Hear me out. I shouldn't say perfectly comfortable, but I'm comfortable at this point. I've gotten to the point where I'm comfortable saying these things with you. I know you're getting mad on the other end of the phone. We haven't heard from some people, though, and we haven't given other people the opportunity to speak without being mad. And the reason why I say that I can't say I'm fully comfortable is that the first time that I tried to address this, you got very angry, and your messages to me and your emails to me made me not take this kind of step. So I know that many of us are conflict averse, and so that's why the bylaws allow us for a period to deliberate without the person who feels slighted or offended or outraged or that person on the call, because maybe not everyone is comfortable talking about this when there's anger and sort of people taking it personally.
There goes the angry man again. That's what gets me. It's all a dog whistle, buddy.
Right, or being accused of being racist. Like all of those things are things that we need to be comfortable speaking on this without any of that, and Dell thinks we're all lunatics and everything like that. But, what we did was, like, I was able to say a few things after Dell was off the call that I didn't say during the call, like the first thing I said, which was poor thing. Like, I had a lot of sympathy for her during the whole process, and it was hard for me to put her through that and all of that stuff. But I didn't want to say that while she was on the call, give her false hope. So there are all kinds of reasons why our bylaws stipulate that we do things this way. And the good thing about it is that they were written long before any of us were even aware that the bylaws could instruct us in this way.
You will have to determine it's a conflict of interest first before I would get off the call.
Yes.
So I have a point of order here. If we were to presume that the procedures that Linda Park shared with us today were, at least worth trying as we go through our sort of maiden voyage through this, right? They could be like a working draft policy or whatever. We really actually have to codify our findings. And so I would be very uncomfortable voting without the presence of both a disclosure kind of questionnaire, but also an assessment of the findings. Now, Eric, you've made it you've brought some facts to the table. Egberto has brought some facts to the table. But these procedures basically say there is a review and evaluation of that disclosure. And I don't know that there's any need to not take a few more days until our next meeting or whatever to basically do that. And so I think that that's valuable because then there's no question on what we're voting on. You know, what we're voting on now is how I heard what you said and how I heard what Egberto said, and not even on the questions not asked. So if we were actually evaluating a motion on a disclosure statement, then I think you're correct that any party involved in that disclosure statement would be excused, right? But I don't think we're there yet, but we've come so far in what that document would look like. And I've been taking crazy notes so that I could even make a first draft of what that would look like. Egberto, there's no intention here to draw this out on my part. It's more like this is an amazing opportunity for us to actually have an issue underfoot and to try out these guidelines. So
yeah, I agree. I agree, Jeanene. We need to follow whatever the bylaws say.
Right, but I think it's useful. So the question is this, I think. Do we want to pursue the disclosure process? And that would be a legitimate vote and a conclusion to this meeting. You know, because we've been doing it here. That's what we've been doing. But that if we pursue the disclosure process, then we would actually come back with a report, so to speak.
You know, from the point of view as far as this, I really don't mind filling out disclosure agreements, right? What I mind is being singled out on something that being singled out for it is what I guess is what I'm saying. I really don't mind. No. It's not a problem. But the problem is I think Eric is being disingenuous in the way I am being singled out for this issue. The person that you and that has not been profitable from Coffee Party. I think it's crazy. So I'll tell you straight up, Eric. I know deep inside I can have judgments as to what you're trying to do. Be careful.
Well, and I appreciate your willingness. I appreciate everybody's willingness to take this because this is something. There's a lot of information from both sides, and obviously clearly different positions on this. It's a very rich opportunity for us to check out what this really means and to follow these procedures and to see where it falls. And so I know it's uncomfortable, and I apologize, Egberto, but it is, I think, important in the maturation of the board. So there, I'll yield the floor. The hands up are Cameron and then Eric.
Yeah. So, me first, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the disclosure side of things, I think, need to be. I definitely like that idea. I definitely want to, make sure that we clean the cobwebs out on the back end of this, just because it's necessary for us to really move forward. There's 6 of us, so we can find our way on some of these issues to tie matchups in reference to these things. But I really think that we need to be real careful, and to Egberto's point, about how we throw this at anybody at this point. Because I'm going to say it like this. If we want to expand our reach, and our goal is to expand our base and to bring in more people to do more work and volunteers, then putting our brand and our product in whatever situation that can be perceived of a legal matter, or if we want to try and censor people from the things that they say outside of it being an edited way of doing business. In other words, if we have at the tail end of this thing a buddy system where people do writing, and if there's something that's inflammatory, that the suggestion is put back to the other person, not edited, but put back to the other person that this is inflammatory, and this is inflammatory, and this is inflammatory. And then that person then can post it with a stipulation maybe that somebody can, call for this specific post to not be posted because of this inflammatory thing, that there's an editorial board that absolutely has guidelines and has a way of doing this business so that we can alleviate this problem again, then I think that makes some sense. But I don't want to deny people who have a talent for writing, whether it be they be left, whether they be right, to have an ability to do so. Because the essence of this is if you try and negate the talents of those that are in your organization based upon one point of view or another, then sooner or later you're going to chip away at the bricks that hold the house up. I don't think that that's the right answer or the right direction that we should be taking. And this is coming from somebody who doesn't post on this stuff on our website, but in reference to it, I think we definitely need to be mindful of that as we start drafting this kind of policy. And with that, I yield.
Eric, you're the last hand. Well, I wanted to tell everybody we're 3 minutes from our 2 hours, so we should look to resolution at this point about where we go next.
I'll end this comment with a motion. So, Cameron, thank you for your thoughtful contributions. Once again, the Heritage Foundation, Fire Dog Lake, New York Times, does not have an interest party making policy on the board of directors of the Coffee Party. If they did, that would be the issue, okay? So the issue before us is we basically need to determine a policy that would apply to me, the Story of America, would apply to any new person that we bring in, and I'm glad you brought that up, Cameron, because I need to have an idea of whether it's an obligation, a right, or a duty, or what it is for the Coffee Party to have some guidelines in terms of protecting our brand. And we've skirted around this for a long time because we didn't want to have these kinds of conflicts. And now here we are. Is it our obligation, as Jeanene says? Is it our duty, as I say? Is it not our right, as Egberto says? We have to determine that, okay? And if we want to bring in new people, then this is what's going to happen. I'm going to say to them something. It won't be this, because first it might not be this, because first we'll have to, as a board, deliberate. But I might say, look, I really admire what you're posting on your gay rights website, so much so that I posted it to the Coffee Party's page, but now I want you to be part of the family. But here's the thing. Gay rights is really not part of our mission statement. We have expanded our mission statement to include people's authenticity principles so that people can be who they are, and we certainly don't want you to hide the fact that you're gay. So it's perfectly all right for you to mention that in your posts or in your blogs and everything like that. And if you could write about gay, marriage equality, all that stuff every day on your website. But as a contributor to our Facebook page, we're going to limit that to 3 times a week. Now, if that person says, no, you have no right, well, we're going to say we have a policy that we deliberated and we set. And what I'm asking the board to do today is, well, I was going to ask today, is that we determine that we have that obligation to have this policy, that we formulate that policy, and we need to pursue the question also that if there is a conflict of interest, then it may be required of us to formulate that policy without people like me or Egberto necessarily voting on it, but with us having the ability to contribute to the conversation. So with that, at Jeanene's suggestion, I move that we end this meeting by voting on whether to proceed by asking Egberto to fill out this form so that we can look at the form, do further discovery, then decide if there's a conflict of interest. So then we can then proceed with actually creating this policy so that we can do, as the email that I created with Annabelle today actually says, is start to bring new people in. Because without any kind of policy, it's going to be chaotic to bring new people in. And we'll say, well, you can post as often as you want without any regulations. There's no brand promise at all, and it's going to be chaos on our Facebook page. I'm sorry, that was a stupid motion. I just moved that we proceed by asking Egberto to fill out the form.
So my understanding is the motion is that we proceed with the disclosure process.
Right.
And
yes.
So there is no judgment made. It's just we're going to take facts we heard today and any other facts that want to be contributed, that we'll open a doc and do this in a transparent way. And at some point, there may be people excluded from the evaluation of that document in the conversation, but not yet. And is that the motion? Okay, I
Right.
second.
There's discussion.
Go ahead, Bub.
Okay.
We're running over, so we're going to be quick.
Yeah, well, what I want is that if I'm going to fill out a disclosure of anything financial that can affect this page, I'd like a disclosure filled out by every single member that may have any influence on this. Otherwise, I'm singled out.
Oh, I don't think it's that kind of form. I'm going to look back at the form. Wait, I want to actually answer this correctly. No. This is a yes/no. I mean, it says, do you know of any transaction? I mean, do you have this doc in front of you, Egberto? I mean, I'd be happy to work with you. You know, if you start doing this, if you start doing this doc and decide you want to do it, we can have that conversation separately.
No.
I think
what
what
I'm
we're
saying
is
I want everybody. If you're asking Egberto Willies, myself, out a disclosure document on me posting from a website, I think we need that a financial disclosure document must be posted by everybody who posts from some other website. I mean, it's just fair. I mean, I'm saying this is the rules.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Listen, I do think that this basically says up at the top that everybody who becomes a director would have to do this. I'm looking.
Right. So every one of us as directors have to put anything that we may have as financial conflict. So like I said, you know, I'm not going to be the poster boy that gets this started is what I'm saying. In other words, I don't mind filling it out because it's not going to be very extensive at all, but it must apply to everybody, and I'll be watching it because what happens, Jeanene, is I have a list of stuff here of folks who've actually profited from Coffee Party, and now you're going to single out the person that hasn't for that? No, I'm sorry. It doesn't work that way.
Okay, so I'm looking to see whether or not everyone should do this, just based on these rules that we're embracing right now in a draft relationship. I have no qualms doing that. And I'm not even sure how far, Egberto, I don't know how far this goes in asking you for that.
No, I know, but what I'm saying, Jeanene, it's a respect thing.
No, I hear you.
It's a respect thing because
I'm fine with that.
I am being disrespected and completely disrespected. And for the person that has really been keeping that, one of the persons really keeping that Facebook page viable, I'm being penalized for it. So, no, I am sorry. It has to be something that affects us all. Otherwise, I'm sorry, Dan, that you didn't like me using the word vendetta, but this is applicable.
Okay.
Hold on. To prove you're wrong, I'll fill out the form. I have no problem with that.
Hold on.
I'll fill out the form as well.
Do I hear, Eric, it would be up to you to amend your motion.
Yeah, I accept the friendly amendment. Just to clarify, Jeanene, the bylaws do not require that everyone who joins the board fills out this form. The bylaws say that it's the responsibility of the directors, if they think that they might have a conflict of interest, that they should fill it out, but there's no real way of enforcing that, and I don't think that's the issue here. The document that Linda provided us that you and I hadn't seen until today,
right?
It's not the bylaws, but it's a good interpretation of the bylaws, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't abide by it, even though we haven't voted to adopt it or anything. Egberto makes the motion that everybody fill it out. Let's all fill it out.
I second that. Because the second paragraph is called disclosure, and it basically says all directors would have done it. So if we want to use this as our practice document or as our first shot, right, the maiden voyage here, I concur. So thank you, Eric. The motion stands amended. That everyone fill this out? Do we have a by when?
Hell, I can have it to you today.
I mean, you want to take a week?
You
want to take 10 days? You want to take 2 days? I apologize.
By next board meeting.
Okay. I don't know when that is.
Which is when, by the way.
Is it Wednesday or the Wednesday? Oh, no, is it Tuesday?
Which is tomorrow at 6 in the morning Pacific, right?
That's not happening for me.
Okay, by next board meeting, okay, there's the motion. Is there more discussion before we can vote?
I just want to make one statement. And Egberto, it's no disrespect, man, but disrespect has no place in a boardroom ever, because I know so many times I've been in arguments with people to the point where they would have slit my throat and I would have slit theirs. And by the time we were done with the board meeting and everything was settled out, we went and drank a beer afterwards. I love the fact that the board meetings get like this, because it ends up being that it's kind of like a chess game. So I'm completely in with your point, equal treatment of all, and that's the right freaking answer, because if that wasn't the case, Acorn would still be in business today, you know. But obviously our Congress decides not to follow conflict of interest rules. Anyway, enough of that. We can get moving on this motion.
All right, so I'm going to drop everybody's hands. So the motion, as I understand it, is this: that by the next board meeting, wherever that is, we will have all filled out this conflict of interest statement to the best of our ability. And please be informed by the lead into this document that was prepared by the Board Development Group. So any corrections to that understanding of the motion? All in favor, 1, against 2, and abstain 3. It's unanimous. That motion passes. Are we ready to check out since we're over time?
Hold on.
I'm going to start with Cameron.
I'm sorry that we didn't get to all the Viridian stuff that we need to get to. We can definitely save that for another day if we wanted to. In reference to this, I'm a believer now that we need to really define conflict of interest, and we need to get to a point where we understand that financial gain doesn't necessarily mean conflict of interest, but we definitely always have to look at it, because I think that we're in this position here for a reason, and it's to make the betterment of the coffee party better. So thank you all for a very heated debate, and I look forward to working a little bit more with you guys about this stuff.
Thanks. Dan?
Love you all. Let's not do this again.
At
least not on a Sunday.
I was going to make some crude remark about some people like it rough, but I don't think I will. Egberto.
Oh, God. Oh, that was bad. Anyway, you guys have a great Sunday. I think spending all this time on EgbertoWillies.com is a conflict of interest. I'm sorry that we had to do that because, and Eric, I don't know where you're coming from. We should not have been having a website, a conflict of interest. And with that, I'm out.
I'll go next. I'll let Eric go last. Thank you, everybody. We ran an hour over time. I think this has been an awkward conversation, but I think it's been and people seeking a genuine meeting or understanding of one another, and for that I will always be grateful. Thanks. I'm out.
Okay, I want to say thank you to everyone for listening or participating today. When we have these questions to decide, it's really important that we seek the counsel of one another and that we deliberate and that we make a collective decision in order to avoid not just conflict of interest, but any appearance of conflict of interest for our members, for the community at large. And that's exactly what we're doing, and you guys have all contributed tremendously to that, and I thank you.
Oh,
hey,
one other thing.
Is Justin in a position where he can check out?
Well, he has to also vote, because he texted me that he voted aye, so he voted in favor.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thanks, Justin.
Wait, I want to see the proxy form with Justin's signature saying he proxied his vote to Cameron.
I will send a picture to all of you.
All right.
Gotta love
So I
that.
think we're good to go. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you for your time, guys.
Vaya con Dios.